Dare to Lead, by BrenA Ï Brown. Introduction. Picture this. A conference green room, buzzing with the nervous energy of 20 speakers about to go on stage. The air is thick with ambition. And in the middle of it all is a researcher named BrenA Ï Brown, and she is starting to panic. She peeks through the heavy velvet curtains and sees a sea of dark suits. It looks like a Brooks Brothers convention. She turns to the super-energetic speaker next to her and whispers, "Oh my God. These are all business people. Executives." He chuckles. "Yeah, mate. It's a conference for C-levels." The blood drains from her face. CEOs, COOs, CFOs. And Brene is here to talk about shame. The feeling of not being good enough. The speaker, an Australian guy named Pete, must have seen the terror in her eyes. He puts a hand on her shoulder and says, "Look out into that audience again. These are people. Just people. And no one talks to them about shame, and every single one of them is in it up to their eyeballs. Just like the rest of us. Look at them. They are people." This single moment, this simple reminder, people, 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 would change the course of her career. And it's the perfect place for us to start our journey into one of the most influential leadership books of the past decade. Hello, and welcome. Today, we're diving into BrenA Ï Brown's powerhouse book, Dare to Lead. This isn't just some dusty business manual. This is a book that has sold millions of copies and has been embraced by leaders at Pixar, Microsoft, and even within the ranks of the U.S. military. Why? Because it answers a question that haunts every person who has ever tried to lead a team, a family, or even just their own life. How do you find the courage to show up when you're terrified of failing? BrenA Ï Brown is a research professor who spent 2 decades studying the very things we try to hide: vulnerability, shame, and fear. Her TED Talk, The Power of Vulnerability, is one of the most watched talks of all time, with tens of millions of views. She didn't set out to be a leadership guru. She set out to understand what it means to be human. And what she found is that the heart of great leadership isn't about power, or status, or having all the answers. It's about having the courage to be vulnerable. By the end of our time together, you will understand the 4 simple, teachable skills that make up all courage. You'll discover that bravery isn't a personality trait you're born with. It's a practice. And you'll have a roadmap for how to handle tough conversations, build unbreakable trust, and get back up after you fall, stronger than before. This is the playbook for becoming a daring leader. So, let's begin. Book summary. So what does it really mean to be a leader? We often think of someone with a fancy title, a corner office, a person who commands a room with unshakable confidence. But BrenA Ï Brown offers a much simpler, much more powerful definition. She says a leader is anyone who takes responsibility for finding the potential in people and processes, and has the courage to develop that potential. By that definition, you're a leader. Whether you're the captain of your soccer team, the head of a school project, or just someone your friends turn to for advice. The call to lead is a call to be brave. But here's the problem she discovered. When she interviewed over 150 senior leaders from all over the world, CEOs, generals, nonprofit directors, and asked them, what needs to change about leadership today? The answer was unanimous. We need braver leaders. But when she pushed them, when she asked, "Okay, so what are the skills of brave leadership? What does it look like?" they went quiet. Most of them couldn't name the specific behaviors. They could, however, passionately list all the things that get in the way. Things like avoiding tough conversations. Not giving honest feedback because it feels uncomfortable. A lack of trust. A fear of taking risks. Blaming others when things go wrong. It became clear that we don't have a leadership problem so much as we have a courage problem. And our courage problem is really a vulnerability problem. This is the very heart of the book. The one sentence that changes everything is this: you can't get to courage without rumbling with vulnerability. Now, let's pause on that word. Vulnerability. For a lot of us, it's a word that makes us cringe. It sounds like weakness. It sounds like oversharing your feelings or crying in the office. But that's not what it is. BrenA defines vulnerability as uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure. Think about it. Can you name a single example of courage, in your life or in history, that did not require someone to face uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure? She's asked this question to everyone from Special Forces soldiers to fighter pilots to CEOs. And no one has ever been able to name one. Not one. Courage and vulnerability are not two different things. They are two sides of the same coin. The courage to ask someone on a first date. The courage to give honest feedback to a friend. The courage to try out for a team when you're not sure you'll make it. The courage to raise your hand in class and say, "I don't understand." All of that is vulnerability. It's not winning or losing. It's having the courage to show up and be seen when you can't control the outcome. And because it feels so risky, our natural instinct is to protect ourselves. We build armor. This armor isn't made of steel. It's made of thoughts, emotions, and behaviors. It's the armor that keeps us from ever having to feel vulnerable. And this is where most leaders, and most of us, get it wrong. We spend our lives polishing our armor, believing it keeps us safe, when in reality, it's keeping us small. It's preventing us from connecting with people, from innovating, and from being the brave leaders we're meant to be. BrenA identifies 16 types of this leadership armor, but let's talk about a few of the most common ones. The first is one we all know: perfectionism. Perfectionism isn't about striving to be your best. That's healthy. Perfectionism is the belief that if we do everything perfectly, if we look perfect, we can avoid the pain of blame, judgment, and shame. It's a 20-ton shield that we lug around, thinking it's protecting us, when really, it's just preventing us from ever truly being seen. It's a hustle. It's always focused on one question: what will people think? Another piece of armor is numbing. We all have our go-to numbing agents: food, social media, video games, staying busy, working all the time. When we feel that uncomfortable edge of anxiety or disappointment, we reach for something to make it go away. The problem is, you can't selectively numb emotion. When you numb the dark, you numb the light. When you numb pain, you also numb joy, love, and connection. And maybe the most common armor of all? Being a knower and always being right. This is that need to have all the answers, to never look stupid. The knower is always posturing, always defending. This armor kills curiosity. It shuts down our ability to learn. Because if our job is to be right, we can't ever afford to be wrong. And if you can't be wrong, you can't learn anything new. So if this is the armor we wear, how do we take it off? How do we find the courage to show up without it? BrenA Ï Brown's research uncovered that daring leadership is a collection of 4 skill sets. Just 4. And the most incredible part is that they can be taught, observed, and measured. Courage is not a personality trait. It's a skill. And these are the 4 skills. The first, and the foundation for all the others, is rumbling with vulnerability. A rumble is her term for a conversation, a meeting, or a discussion defined by a commitment to lean into discomfort, to stay curious, and to own our part. It's about having the tough conversations instead of avoiding them. And the essential mantra for this skill is a simple one: clear is kind. Unclear is unkind. How many times have we avoided giving direct feedback because we didn't want to hurt someone's feelings? We tell ourselves we're being nice. But are we? Is it kind to let a teammate continue to make a mistake because you're too uncomfortable to tell them? Is it kind to be vague about your expectations and then get frustrated when they don't deliver? No. That's unkind. Feeding people half-truths to make them feel better is almost always about making ourselves feel better. Brene learned this firsthand. She tells a story about how her leadership team had to sit her down for a rumble. Her CFO, a man named Chaz, said to her, "We keep setting unrealistic timelines, working frantically to meet them, and then failing. People are burning out. When you set a timeline and we push back, you get so insistent that we stop pushing. It's not working." Her first instinct was to shut down, to say, "Okay, I get it, I'll work on it," just to end the conversation. It was painful. It was uncomfortable. But she leaned into her own teaching. She got curious. She asked, "Tell me more." And as she listened, she realized her impossible timelines weren't driven by ambition. They were driven by fear. The fear that they weren't doing enough, that someone else was going to beat them to an idea. Instead of owning that fear and talking about it, she was offloading her anxiety onto her team in the form of impossible deadlines. By having that rumble, they came up with new systems. But more importantly, they built trust. She showed them she was willing to be vulnerable, to own her part, and to change. That's what rumbling is all about. It's about choosing courage over comfort. Perhaps one of the most moving stories in the book about this skill comes from a U.S. Air Force colonel named Dia Halfhill. Day was speaking to a group of about 40 airmen. At the end, a young man raised his hand and asked, "Ma'am, when is the pace of operations going to slow down? Because we are really tired." Day could have given a standard leadership answer. Something about mission readiness or national security. But instead, she chose to rumble. She said, "I hear you. Leaders across the Air Force know you're tired." And then she did something incredibly brave. She said, "I want to share something I read recently." An organization was studying companies with high levels of exhaustion. And they found that it wasn't just because of the workload. The employees were exhausted because they were lonely. Loneliness manifests as exhaustion. She paused, then looked out at the group. "So, if I were to ask you, instead of who's tired, who's lonely? How many of you would raise your hand?" 15 hands went up. Nearly half the room. She was shocked. Her first thought was, "I'm not a therapist. I'm not equipped for this." She wanted to change the topic, to move away from the discomfort. But she didn't. She held the space. She looked at them and said, "Honestly, this breaks my heart. And seeing so many of you raise your hands scares me a little because I'm not entirely sure what to do. If you tell me you're tired, I tell you to get some rest. But if you're lonely, and I send you off to be by yourself, I could be making the very problem we're trying to combat even worse." That one vulnerable question opened the door to a real conversation. They talked about connection, about inclusion, about how to build community. She didn't have the answers. But by naming the real problem, not exhaustion, but loneliness, she showed them they weren't alone. She chose to connect with them in their struggle, instead of trying to fix it. That is the essence of rumbling with vulnerability. The second skill of daring leadership is living into our values. Imagine you're in the arena. The crowd is roaring. The critics are shouting from the cheap seats. It's loud, it's chaotic, and it's easy to get distracted. It's easy to forget why you even stepped in there in the first place. Your values are your North Star. They are the light that guides you when it gets dark. They are the reason you're in the arena. But here's the catch: We can't live into values that we can't name. Brene argues that we should be able to identify our 2 core values. Just 2. Not 10 or 15. Because if you have more than 3 priorities, you have no priorities. She provides a long list of values, words like authenticity, compassion, family, faith, integrity, success, justice. The task is to narrow it down to the 2 that define who you are at your very best. The 2 that act as a filter for your hardest decisions. For Brene, her 2 values are faith and courage. At first, she hated not picking family. Her family is the most important thing in her life. But as she dug deeper, she realized her commitment to her family is fueled by her faith and courage. It takes courage for her to say no to a work trip so she can be home for her kids. Her faith reminds her that if she does what's right, other opportunities will come. But naming your values is just the first step. The real work is in step 2, taking your values from nice-sounding words to actual behaviors. For each of your 2 values, you have to answer 3 questions. 1. What are 3 behaviors that support this value? 2. What are 3 slippery behaviors that are outside this value? 3. What's an example of a time when I was fully living this value? This is what she calls operationalizing your values. For example, if one of your values is respect, what does that actually look like? Does it mean listening without interrupting? Does it mean not talking about people behind their backs? Does it mean valuing others' time by being punctual? When you can define the behaviors, you can practice them. And you can hold yourself and others accountable. Living into our values means we practice what we preach. And here's the key: daring leaders who live into their values are never silent about hard things. This leads us to the 3rd skill, braving trust. Trust. It's the glue that holds teams, families, and organizations together. And talking about it can feel like walking through a minefield. We all want to be seen as trustworthy, but we're often hesitant to trust others. The problem is we talk about trust as this big, monolithic thing. I don't trust you. Where do you even go from there? It feels like a personal attack. So Brene and her team broke it down. They asked, what is trust, really? What are the specific, observable behaviors that build it? They came up with an acronym, BRAVING. Each letter stands for one of the 7 elements of trust. The Braving Inventory is a tool to help us get specific and have productive conversations. Let's walk through it. B is for boundaries. You respect my boundaries, and when you're not clear, you ask. You're willing to say no. Generous people have the clearest boundaries. R is for reliability. You do what you say you'll do. Over and over again. This means you don't overpromise, and you're aware of your limitations. A is for accountability. You own your mistakes, you apologize for them, and you make amends. V is for vault. This one is subtle but powerful. The vault means you don't share information that isn't yours to share. It's about confidentiality. But it's a 2-way street. It doesn't just mean that my secrets are safe with you. It also means you don't come to me and share other people's secrets. If someone is constantly gossiping to you, you can't trust that they're not gossiping about you. I is for integrity. This is about choosing courage over comfort. It's choosing what's right over what's fun, fast, or easy. And it's practicing your values, not just professing them. N is for non-judgment. I can ask for what I need, and you can ask for what you need. We can talk about how we're feeling without being judged. And, this is a big one, we can ask for help. In fact, her research with leaders found that the single most common behavior that earns their trust is people asking for help. Leaders don't give the most important projects to the people who act like they know everything. They give them to the people they trust to raise their hand and say, "I'm stuck," before things go too far off track. And finally, G is for generosity. You extend the most generous interpretation possible to the intentions, words, and actions of others. In other words, you assume positive intent. You assume people are doing the best they can. These 7 behaviors are the anatomy of trust. They take this big, scary concept and turn it into something we can talk about, practice, and build, one small moment at a time. This brings us back to one of the most important lessons in the book, which she illustrates with her marble jar story. When her daughter, Ellen, was in 3rd grade, she came home from school devastated. She had shared a secret with her friends, and by the end of the day, the whole class knew. She told her mom, "I will never trust anyone again." Instead of agreeing, Brene told her about the marble jar. She said, "Trust is like a marble jar. Every time someone is kind to you, or keeps a secret, or sticks up for you, you put a marble in their jar. And when people are mean, or break a promise, marbles come out. You share your secrets with the people who, over time, have filled up your jar." The lesson is profound. Trust isn't built in big, heroic moments. It's built in tiny, everyday moments. It's a friend remembering your parents' names. It's a colleague scooting over to make room for you at the lunch table. It's the slow, steady accumulation of marbles, one small act of integrity at a time. This brings us to the 4th and final skill set of daring leadership, learning to rise. If you're going to be brave in your life, you are going to fall. You will fail. You will get your heart broken. You will have setbacks. That is not a maybe, it is a guarantee. That's why we call it courage. And if we don't teach people how to get back up, they will stop taking risks. The leaders who are trained in rising skills before they fall are far more likely to be brave in the first place. So how do we do it? The learning to rise process has 3 steps: the reckoning, the rumble, and the revolution. And the best way to understand it is through a story she tells. About ham. She calls it the ham fold-over debacle. A few years ago, she was completely overwhelmed. She was launching a new company and a new book at the same time. Her dining room was a chaotic mess of papers and boxes. She was on the verge of tears when her husband, Steve, came home. He walked into the kitchen, opened the fridge, and said, "We don't even have any damn lunch meat in this house." That one sentence sent her over the edge. Her internal story started instantly. "He's so ungrateful. I'm drowning here, and all he can think about is ham? He's trying to let me know how much I'm failing right now." This brings us to step 1, the reckoning. The reckoning is simply recognizing that you are emotionally hooked. Something's got you. You feel it in your body? The clenched jaw? The tight fists? The knot in your stomach? Instead of immediately acting on that emotion, you pause and get curious. But Brene didn't pause. She marched into the kitchen and unleashed a torrent of sarcasm about how he could drive his big truck to the grocery store and buy his own damn ham. The fight escalated until Steve, completely confused, stopped her and said, "What's really going on?" This is where the magic happens. Instead of doubling down on her anger, she used the single most powerful tool from the book. She said, "The story I'm telling myself right now is this." This phrase is a game changer. It allows you to own your feelings and your narrative without presenting them as fact. She told him, "The story I'm telling myself is that I am a half-ass leader, a half-ass mom, a half-ass wife. I'm disappointing every single person in my life. And what I'm making up is that you walked in and wanted to make sure that I knew how badly things suck right now." This leads to step 2, the rumble. The rumble is where you get honest about the story you're making up, your shitty first draft, as she calls it. In the absence of data, Our brains will always make up stories to make sense of the world. And those first stories are almost always written by our fear and our insecurities. By sharing her story with Steve, she gave him a window into her world. And he didn't try to fix it. He met her with empathy. He said, "I get it. You are so far underwater right now, you can't even find your way up. I'm diving down. I'm going to find you, and I'm going to pull you to the surface." They connected. The fight dissolved. But she was still curious. She asked him, "But why the big proclamation about the ham? Was it a little dig at me?" He thought for a moment and said, "I was so hungry. I got stuck with a patient at lunch and didn't eat. On the way home, I was thinking, I'm gonna make a ham fold over." That's it. His comment had nothing to do with her. It had everything to do with him being hungry. Her fear and overwhelm had made her the center of a story that wasn't about her at all. This is the rumble. It's challenging the conspiracies and confabulations we create in our heads and asking, what do I know objectively? What assumptions am I making? And what is my part in this? The difference between her shitty first draft "Steve thinks I'm a failure" and the truth "Steve was hungry" is what she calls the delta, and in that delta is where all the wisdom and learning lives. Which leads to the final step, the revolution. The revolution is what happens when we integrate these learnings into our lives. It's when we take what we learned from our fall and use it to rise stronger. When we have the courage to walk into our story and own it, we get to write the ending. When we deny our stories of failure and hurt, they own us. For Brene, the ham debacle became a moment of revolution. She learned that when she's overwhelmed, she's quick to blame herself. She learned she needs to get better at asking for help. And she owned the fact that she sometimes offloads her hurt as anger. That messy, kitchen confrontation became a story of connection, trust, and growth. This is the work. It's not easy. It's the practice of reckoning with our emotions, rumbling with our stories, and writing new, braver endings. These 4 skills, rumbling with vulnerability, living into our values, braving trust, and learning to rise, are not separate. They are deeply interconnected. You can't live into your values if you're not willing to have the vulnerable conversations that integrity requires. You can't build trust if you can't get back up after your trust is broken. This is the revolution. It's choosing authenticity over approval. It's choosing courage over comfort. It's choosing whole hearts over armor. It's the choice to dare to lead. Commentary. So, what do we take away from all of this? When you first hear these ideas, it's easy to think they're soft. Vulnerability, empathy, feelings. It's easy to dismiss them as things that don't belong in the real world of hard deadlines and bottom lines. But as BrenA Ï Brown often says, if you want to call these soft skills after you've tried putting them into practice, go for it. I dare you. Because the truth is, this is the hardest work there is. It's far easier to hide behind armor, to blame others, to avoid the tough conversations. It is much, much harder to show up, to be seen, and to lead from your heart. What makes Dare to Lead so powerful, especially right now, is that it gives us a practical language for this hard work. It takes these abstract concepts like courage and trust and breaks them down into skills we can actually practice. It gives us permission to be human, and it shows us that our humanity is not a liability in leadership, it is our greatest asset. In a world that feels increasingly divided and cynical, where it's easy to stay in our echo chambers and talk about people instead of to them, this book is a call to rebellion. It's a rebellion against fear. A rebellion against armor. It's a quiet revolution that starts with a single choice, the choice to be brave. So, how can you start putting this into practice, right now, today? Here are 3 simple, powerful actions you can take. First, Do the square squat exercise. Take out a tiny, 1-inch by 1-inch piece of paper. On it, write the names of the people whose opinions of you truly matter. The people who love you not despite your imperfections, but because of them. These are the people in the arena with you. This tiny piece of paper is your shield against the critics and the cheap seats. It's a reminder of who you're really accountable to. Second, try using the magic phrase, "The story I'm telling myself is," the next time you feel that spark of anger or misunderstanding with a friend, a parent, or a teacher. Instead of reacting, try starting the conversation that way. The story I'm telling myself is that you're disappointed in me. It is a disarming, honest, and incredibly brave way to open a real conversation instead of starting a fight. Third, get curious about your 2 core values. You don't have to have them figured out by tonight. But just start the process. Look at a list of values and circle the ones that resonate with you. Start asking yourself, what truly matters to me? What beliefs guide me when I'm at my best? Knowing your values is like having a compass in the wilderness. It won't make the path easy, but it will always show you the way home. That was a deep dive into Dare to Lead by BrenA Ï Brown. We've covered the core ideas today, but I'll be honest with you, a summary can only ever be a map. The real treasure is found on the journey. The real magic happens when you read the book yourself. It's in the quiet moments when a particular story or a simple phrase hits you in a way you didn't expect. This summary is designed to help you decide if this book is worth your time. If anything we've talked about today has resonated with you, I encourage you to grab a copy. Reading it isn't just about learning, it's an experience that can genuinely change the way you see yourself, your relationships, and your own capacity to be brave. Also, if you found this summary valuable, I'd be so grateful if you'd hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. That way, you won't miss our next journey into another life-changing book. Let's keep growing together.